All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SeniorLiving.Org live stream today. We're just going to wait a few minutes, let some people start trickling in. But welcome.
I'm happy to be here, Taylor. Talk to the
Thanks for.
audience. We had such a great time last month.
I know it was so fun. Thanks for being here again. I'm excited to dive into this. Today, we're talking all about knowing when it's time to consider senior living or assisted living. So, lots of good things to talk about.
Yeah, it's a great topic.
Yeah, definitely. And if anyone's here, feel free to say hi, drop a note in the chat. Would love to hear from our audience today as we're all kind of trickling in. Hi, James. Thanks for joining.
Hey, James. If you see my backdrop moving, I mean that's not magic or anything. I have a fan on.
I mean, it could be magic. You never know.
Right.
I love that.
Voila, magic.
Awesome. Well, it looks like I'm seeing a few more people trickle in. Hi, MD. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome. My name is Taylor Schumann. If you haven't been to our live streams before, I am the editor and senior tech expert at SeniorLiving.Org. And today I'm joined by Dr. Macie P. Smith. She is incredible. I'm so excited. Today we are going to be talking about knowing when it's time to consider assisted living or senior living for an older loved one. So before we dive in, I'd love to give you a little bit of background on Dr. Macie if you haven't joined us with her in the past. She is a best-selling author known for her work on dementia-competent practices in family caregiving matters. Her real-world, unapologetic approach to practical caregiving has been published in national and international professional journals and syndicated news articles. She is a licensed gerontology social worker and an award-winning Alzheimer's and dementia educator with over 25 years of experience coordinating care for aging and vulnerable populations. So welcome, Dr. Macie.
Thank you for having me back, Taylor, and special thanks to your audience. Thank you, James, for welcoming me back into the fold.
Yes, we are so excited to have you back. Okay, so we're going to dive into our Q&A. So if you want to join in and ask any questions, just make sure you're signed into your YouTube account, and then you can drop any questions you have in the chat. But we'll just get started. We have some questions that we already have lined up, but jump in anytime, any questions for Dr. Macie that come up, we would love to answer them. All right. So first question, what are some of the earliest signs that a senior might not be safe in their own home anymore, or maybe not as well supported as they need to be?
I'm glad that you said, or not well supported as well as they need to be. Before I answer, I want to say that everybody's situation is different. Everybody's body is different. So the type of dementia they had, other co-occurring or comorbid conditions can also play a part in how their current situation is assessed, their environment, their home-like environment, any natural support such as family members and close friends. All of that plays a part. And so what I may say as is an early sign may not be an early sign for this person. It may be an early sign for that person. So, generalistically speaking, whenever a family member is concerned about, or a loved one is concerned about that person living at home alone, and they're concerned about their health, their wealth, and their safety, then it is a time when you want to look at supporting the person first in the least restrictive environment, right? It always needs to be in the least restrictive environment. So when I bring someone into my practice, that's what I look at. If you coming to me because you want me to tell your sister to put your mama in a nursing home, you come to the wrong person. I'm not gonna jump and do that because I have to do an assessment to determine what is the least restrictive environment. So Taylor, with blessings, we are all going to reach a milestone age, right? We want to, right? And so we want to be sure and we want to be mindful that the energy that we put out there and the actions and experiences we put out there, we got to be mindful that those experiences can boomerang back to us, right? That's why I only have one child and I am very nice to her. And so, I have to be mindful. Like, I'm still the mama though. But if you are concerned about their health, wealth, safety, and well-being, now let's look at building wraparound supports around the person where they are. You heard the saying, meet people where they are. Literally go into their home to see what type of supports they need. I typically first start with in-home supports. What does that look like? Bringing in an in-home care provider. I do a lot of work with Synergy Home Care. That's just one of hundreds. They ensure that their individuals are well trained. A lot of home care companies are training their individuals, caregivers, on how to provide care to our senior population, to respect them, to support their family needs, and also train in dementia competent practices. But there are some licensed home care companies who do not believe in training their caregivers. True story. I had an
Wow.
individual who called and they wanted to book a service, an in-home care provider, and they wanted to know what I thought. Well, I mean, I don't know. Let me call and find out some things, and I'll let you know what my thoughts are, my professional opinion. Well, when I asked about their training curriculum, and they told me, and I quote, well, the caregiver just learns when they get there. So
What?
you mean on the job training?
It's not gonna work.
Not when it comes to quality of care. And so what does that support look like in the home? Because what happens is when we go to the most restrictive form of action, that restricts the individual. And what could potentially occur is that they could become very depressed, they could become very saddened, apathy could set in, it could affect their overall quality of life and their health, because what you've done is strip them of all the independence. You've stripped them from all of the normalcy and familiarity. And so let's see what this person needs in order to remain at home alone. There have been some situations, just say if a senior left the stove on and the house smoked up and the family was concerned about that person's safety and cooking, and they said, okay, mom loves to cook, she gonna cut that stove on at any point in time, she could burn down the house. Well, newsflash, we just had to go get some Kiehl's paint yesterday because I did that. I don't have dementia, I'm not a senior. I mean, just doing stuff and not paying attention, and I took a Benadryl. The smoke detector did not go off. I just smelled smoke and I was like, oh my gosh. And so I always think in compassion, in a compassionate way.
Mm.
So I think to myself, I thank my husband for being so understanding and for not, like, chastising me for leaving the pot on the stove and burning up food that I barely cook anyway. But he understood, hey, this can happen to anyone. What's your plan to not let it happen again? Well, let's go get the scent out the house. Let's go get some paint and paint all the study areas. And I said to myself, if we all would approach our seniors in the same compassionate way, in the same understanding way, and being able to continue to support their independence, we would have a different outcome, right? And so again, if you're concerned about it, now it's time to look at wraparound supports. What supports can we bring into the home? So if there's a concern about mom cooking and she could burn down the house, that is a valid concern. Now, what can we do to ensure that she stays in her home, but in a safe way? You may look at doing a power switch, so a disconnect switch, whereas when nobody is there, that switch is off. But she don't know nothing about that switch now. But when I come over, I can monitor her cooking and I can cut that switch on without her knowing. Because Taylor, we got a bad habit of telling our mamas and daddies what they ain't gonna do, right? And what we gonna
Yes.
do. That's gonna create resistance, right?
Mhm.
And so building in-home supports, building wraparound supports first in order to support their need for independence in a safe and healthy way.
I love that. And that's so true that a lot of times when we're talking to older adults, there's not that sense of compassion. And we
Mm.
immediately jump to, oh, it's because they're old, rather than like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe they just forgot this one time or whatever it is. Like when that happened to you, you had, such a great response from your husband. Why don't we do that for seniors?
Right. I feel like he set me up because I feel like he's getting ready to do something or has already done something. So when I find out, he's like, remember when, you
He's
know,
like,
but you are right. We just automatically want to blame them or assert that what they're doing or what they've done is based on their age or what they're going through. That's just not fair. And I often tell people, you can learn more about how to care and how to support for someone with dementia and a senior by walking in your own shoes, because they're people first, just like you and I.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the quote, they're living for the first time too.
Oh, I love
I've heard
that.
before, and just such a reminder of like, we make mistakes, everyone makes mistakes, and having that compassion is so good.
Sure, all the time.
Yeah. James asks, how do you spell the name of that paint again? Maybe James left a pot on the stove too.
It's not even paint. It's a primer. It's called Kills. Kilz. And so it's a primer. It kills the odor. It brings it's white. Luckily my cabinets are white. It covers up the paint, and so smells really good in here now. Not a
I love
reminder.
that.
And then we got a bad habit too of reminding our seniors of how they've messed up, what
Mm,
they've done. They're human. They gonna mess up. Why is it fair for us to mess up and receive understanding and compassion? And it's not fair for them. They're human. They're living. I love that you said they're living for the first time too. But you think because they're older, they should know better. Not that this is the first time they've experienced it. And life happens to all of us. Sometimes we forget things all the time. How
mm.
many times have you driven home on E and passed 20 gas stations and made a decision to make a dumb decision? You see what I'm saying?
Yes, yes, so often.
So often, like right now, maybe, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm like, I should go check how much gas I have.
Yes.
That's so good. Okay, so we talked about, approaching them with that compassion, thinking about what you can do. So, how can family members kind of initiate that conversation with seniors about potentially needing more help, or maybe moving without the senior feeling like they're losing their independence?
Always involve them in the conversation. Knowing the personality of your loved one, knowing the characteristic of your loved one, knowing what's important to them will help you stage the conversation, because you absolutely have to stage the conversation. Just think about, if your loved one is strong minded, very assertive, has always made decisions about their life, especially if it's the patriarch of the family or the matriarch of the family,
Mm,
they're not going to take kindly to you telling them what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, how they're going to do it, right? And so with that type of person who is strong minded, you may talk about some things that they're concerned about, right? They have to be concerned about it. Everybody is concerned about something. And so when you approach it from a position of concern that they've already expressed, that appears as if they are involved in the decision making process, right? But you got to listen to them. A
mm,
lot of times we don't listen to our seniors, we don't listen to our loved ones. We feel like because they've reached a particular age, they don't know what they're talking about, they don't know what's best for them. And a lot of times, believe it or not, it's what's in the best interest of that caregiver and
mm.
that family member, not in what's the best interest of that senior, because they don't want their life upended, they don't want their life interrupted, they want to continue doing what they have going on, and they're not compassionate and understanding. And I will say, I'm not chastising any caregiver who feels that way, because those are natural feelings. I'm not saying that those emotions and those feelings are wrong, because they're not. They're natural, but it's what you do with those feelings that really make a difference and an impact in that senior's life, but also in your life. Because I promise you, if you make the decision to put your loved one in an assisted living or in a nursing facility before they're ready and before it's time, you're going to find yourself doing more work and more damage control than if you were to build supports around them in the least restrictive environment. Because once they're placed in an assisted living or nursing facility, they don't have to keep them. They don't have to keep them. If your loved one becomes agitated, combative, aggressive, or vice versa, they begin to retreat and retract from the community. They start dealing with depression. They're dealing with a lot of falls because now they're sedating them.
Mm.
They're going to call you as the family member and the caregiver, and they could at any point in time tell you to come and get them because they can no longer provide care. And so that's why you want to be mindful of prematurely placing your loved one in out of home placement.
Yeah, that's great. So do you view kind of home care as almost like a step towards, senior care in a facility, or is it more like, okay, let's see how this home care helps, and maybe if they need more care, we move on to a facility? Like, is that kind of a spectrum in your mind?
Well, it could be. And you may find that that's all they needed. right? But that in-home care is a part of the continuing care continuum. The conti- the care continuum. I'm talking about the continuing care continuum. In-home care is a part of the care continuum. And so when you place in-home support in the home or in the person's natural environment, then you can see if that works. If it works, continue to do it, least restrictive environment. But if it's more concerned, so for example, if an in-home caregiver calls out of work, because it is work, they call out just like we call out of our jobs as well, and you don't have a backup plan in place,
Mm,
you might find that in-home care may be more challenging or more frustrating for you to manage as a caregiver. And you may feel as if you're able to better manage your loved one's care if they're in an assisted living or in a nursing facility. In a case like that, then that is again a stepping point, because you're seeing, okay, is this going to work for that person and is it going to work for me? Because we do have to consider the caregiver and the family member, because they are a part of the care plan. But they can't be the only component that we focus on. It has to be a nice balance between what the person needs, and not what they want necessarily, but what they need, what they can identify with, what makes them happy. So we have to consider, their desires as well, in conjunction with the caregiver's ability to manage the care. So when you pit safety and well-being, which is what they enjoy doing, together, many people think that safety is more important than well-being. And when I say well-being, it's their desires and what makes them feel good and what makes them happy. But honestly, well-being for me, and this is my own professional opinion, and this is how I operate my practice. So just know, if you come into me because you want me to side with you caregivers, it might not happen in your way. I'm going to look at what's important to the person first. What's important to them? What gives them quality of life? What gives them belonging, right?
mm,
And then that's going to help me identify and structure a plan for their safety. And that's what caregivers need to do as well. If mom enjoys cooking, right? She longs to cook on Saturday for family to come over on Sunday. But she left that pot on that one time and she could have burned down the house. And so if a caregiver is focusing on safety, they're going to go in and pull that stove out and say you can't cook anymore. You've
mm,
stripped her for what's most important and what connects her to the world around her, and what connects her to what's important, and what connects her to quality of life. And so when you focus on what's important, no, we can't pull that stove out, because if we pull that stove out, mom is going to go into a deep depression. We don't want her to live her last days like that. But then we can't leave the stove in there either, powered on and gas on, because it could cause harm. So what is the nice balance? I wonder if it's a way that we can control when she cuts it on and when she cuts it off. Well, you can. You can put timers. Like I said, you can put a cutoff switch and ensure that she cooks when someone is there. But don't tell her you can only cook when we're here. You can't, because again, you're building up that wall and you're building up that resistance. And so that keeps the person, the senior, involved in their day-to-day care, while ensuring that the caregiver still has a say, but a supported say. They
mm,
are a support. They're a care partner, not a caregiver and a caretaker. Like,
mm.
I don't want you to give the care and then decide to take it away, but I want you to support me in what my care looks like today, tomorrow, and going forward.
Mm. I love that care partner. I think it reframes the way that we think about care, and it's not, you're there to support and to provide, but not, yeah, it just feels, I like the way that you said that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you.
So you mentioned, involving seniors in the conversation when you bring up these things. Um, Going deeper a little bit into that, what role should the senior play in the decision-making process? And I'd especially like to talk about, if your loved one has dementia or other forms of, cognitive decline, how do you have those conversations while still giving them their autonomy?
So you want to have these conversations in the early stages of the disease process, because in the early stages of dementia, they still have the capacity to make decisions. They still have the capacity to participate in the decision-making process. And so if your loved one has been diagnosed with dementia and they still have some capacity, you want to start that conversation. Um, but if you have missed that opportunity and now they may be in the mid stages of dementia, which is the longest stage and the most challenging stage, because I always say they know just enough to be a little dangerous, right? What you say might make sense and what you say may not make sense. And so if they're in the middle stages, then you may incorporate a bit of therapeutic fibbing. So it is a lie, but it gets them through the moment and it ensures their safety, because with dementia, they're losing the capacity to rationalize, to think clearly, and to make good decisions, right? Their ability to make judgment has been affected. And so they're not able to participate in a healthy way in the process, but they still can participate. You may say something like, I always enlist the help of the doctor. The doctors are my friends, because they will write a prescription for anything. I have had a doctor write a prescription for the individual to find alternative placement while their house is being repaired. Because
Wow.
there's always something to be repaired in someone's house, right? And
Totally.
so because of the paint fumes, those paint fumes, they strong, they'll make you sick. And if you get sick, you got to go to the hospital. And you know what happens after you go to the hospital? You might have to go where? To the old folks home. You don't want to go there, right? So we have this other community over here, an assisted living community, because we don't call them facilities, they're communities, and it's temporary. But it's just going to always be temporary, because eventually with dementia, as the disease progresses, they're going to forget a thing is a thing, right? And so they're going to move on to something new. And so you have to be prepared. Number one, you need to get a notebook and write down what you said, because the minute you think that they forgot what you said, they're going to remind you. The person who has dementia is going to remind you of what you said. So you want to be consistent. I hate to say this though, but you want to be consistent in your fibbing. It has to be consistent, but again, it's therapeutic. You're telling their truth. You're not telling yours.
Right. Yes, their truth. I like that. Do you think, are there any kind of misconceptions or stigmas around, you just mentioned facilities versus communities. Are there any stigmas around senior living communities that you encounter when you work with families or with seniors? And how can we combat those?
Yeah. So the first thing I want to ensure that everyone knows is that a dementia community is not in a nursing home, right? You automatically think because it's a dementia care community, it's going to be in a nursing home because it's high level of care. Because dementia is a gradual process, a person does not develop dementia today, right? It is a gradual process. There is a full range of levels of care. It can range from reminders to full on hands on care. And so, actually, dementia care communities don't have the intensive care like a nursing home. So, an assisted living in general is non medical care. Now, typically, and when I say non-medical care, that is not a requirement in order to place your loved one in assisted living. In a nursing facility, they have to meet nursing home level of care, which means they have to have they have to require assistance in at least one area of activity of daily living. In an assisted living, they don't have to meet that requirement, and so an assisted living will have a nurse on staff, but the nurse is not going to be on staff 24 hours a day, but they are required to have staff availability 24 hours a day. And so it's not that high level, high touch care that you think in terms of medical care. Now, there will be one-on-one care for people living in a dementia care community in the assisted living. But if the person requires 24-hour one-on-one support, then that's when the facility administrators may recommend a higher level of care. So that's the first misconception I want to clear up. It's not automatically a nursing home. It is going to be an assisted living. The other misconception is if a person is working in a dementia care community, that they are trained in dementia competent practices and that they are trained in compassionate care. A lot of them are not. I filled out an application. I got time. They got time, right? They're going to hire me. So don't just assume because they work in a dementia care community that they are trained and know how to work with someone who has dementia, because many states do not require that staff are trained in dementia competent practices, but then there are many states who do, right? And then the training that's required, it's a general training. It says the staff, before going on the floor and providing care, they should be trained in communication strategies. Should be trained in preventing behaviors from occurring and behavior solutions. That's general. The provider or the community assisted living could print off a Q&A off of the internet, have the staff read it and sign that they've been trained in it. That is not quality care practices. That's not quality training, because did they actually retain something? It's not competency based. So just be mindful of that. And so those are the two main misconceptions I want to ensure that the audience knows the difference between assisted living, nursing facility when it comes to dementia care communities.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. And as we're on the topic of dementia, we have a question from someone in the audience named MD, who asks, my mother hasn't been diagnosed with dementia, but she used to be a social butterfly and no longer wants to socialize. Any tips on increasing her quality of life now?
I would say, first, I would want to figure out what's happening first, because that's going to help you develop a plan of care. And so I would accompany her, if she allows you to her primary care doctor, and have the primary care doctor do a depression assessment, because she could be dealing with depression. Was there any type of events that occurred prior to the change in her social behavior? Was there a traumatic event? Was there a death in the family, a loss of uh, abilities, sickness or illness or an injury? Because she could be dealing with depression, which oftentimes look like dementia. So don't go to the doctor and say, I think my mom has dementia, because the doctor is going to save about a minute and say, okay, here's your prescription for Aricept. But really, he or she did not do their due diligence to assess and determine what could be causing this sadness, what could be causing this change in behavior, and again, change in her social appearance. You want to figure out what's causing it and what's happening before you develop a plan for quality of care or quality of life.
Mm. Yeah, that's great. Kind of getting to the root cause. Like you said, it could be or it could be depression or something else to consider. So that's great advice. Another question we have: would you move a patient as their level of care requirements increases, or would you already start with the highest level of care?
No, I never start with the highest level of care, because that is a restriction. And with that restriction is going to come rebellion. They're either going to act out with aggression or act in with depression. And so being person-centered, because person-centered care is at the core of dementia competent care and senior care in general. And so I always start with the least restrictive environment. And then you build from there. Very similar to, and I know this is probably, it's going to sound like I'm coming from left field, but very similar to if a person is having behavioral disturbances and a doctor prescribed a behavioral health medication. What should happen, because the person, especially a senior, should be on the lowest effective dose of any behavioral health medications. What should happen, the doctor should start off at a low dose and build, right? And then if it gets to the point where the person is sedated at this level, then bam, they know this here is the lowest effective dose. But you'll have some doctors that'll start high and come low. But Simone, you asked my opinion, and I don't ever start with the highest level of care, because that will absolutely impact negatively the person's quality of life.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And there's, so like you mentioned, there's a lot of different levels of care. And so it's almost like those baby steps, starting small and building as you need it.
Right. Building, yeah, the step stool, right? You're building as you go. You don't build a building at one time. It's one block at a time. And then you create something beautiful. And I like to look at it, when we talk about that something beautiful, that's the person's quality of life. Naturally, we're going to experience biological changes as we age. We're going to start forgetting things. Our perception is going to be different. Our language is going to change. Our taste buds change. I hated tomatoes when I was younger. Like, I had trauma because I went to this buffet and I saw these bright red circle things that I thought were plums, as I love plums, and I got one, and my mom and daddy, they knew I was going to eat it, and they did not warn me that it was a tomato. And so that was traumatizing for me, and I hated tomatoes, but now my palate, I can actually tolerate tomatoes now. And so we're going to change biologically, and so we are going to need some level of support at some point in time while we're aging and we're living, because when you're living, you're aging. When you're aging, you're living. You can't do one without the other. And so knowing that and knowing what that looks like, just always think about you and what you would want and how you would want to be respected and how you would want other people to handle you. You would want to show that same courtesy to someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that about thinking about, how you would care for yourself or what you would want to hear from someone. That's super helpful. We have another question. Gloria, it sounds like, is a senior who is considering assisted living. Do you have any tips for someone who's looking for an assisted living facility, or community, excuse me? How would you find it? What are some kind of things to look out for, do's and don'ts?
Thank you, Gloria, and I'm wishing you all the best. Thank you for being proactive in your care and what that looks like, because, again, when we talk about continuum, the continuum of care, there are oh gosh, let me make sure I get this right. Continuing care retirement communities, CCRCs, right? And so they start with independent living. And so that's when the person owns their home on the campus of a retirement community, right? And as they feel like they need more support, then they may transition into a higher level of care. And so for you, Gloria, right? Was it?
Mm-hmm.
As you're looking at assisted livings, I want you to look at more besides the walls of the community. I want you to pay attention to what goes on behind the walls. So a lot of times we get caught up on the beautification. Oh, this is a new community. And if you pay attention to your community, you drive down the road, Taylor, when you drive down the road today or tomorrow, I want you to look at how many assisted livings you pass. And they are absolutely beautiful. It is a multi-million-dollar industry, right? Because there is a need. But I want you, of course, you want it to be beautiful, but even more so, Gloria, you want it to be clean. If you walk into that assisted living and you are smelling piss, I'm sorry, I'm from the country, I'm just gonna say it like it is. You don't want to move in there, right? Because they're not cleaning and keeping their community up to par and up to a standard that you would want, right? So I would of course schedule an appointment with the administrator, not just a marketing person, because that marketing person may be selling real estate. I don't want you to just sell me real estate, Gloria. I want to know what goes on behind these walls. What type of activities are the participants involved in? What does that transportation look like? Are there any restrictions? In the case of an emergency, how do I get out of here? Right. Another thing, Gloria, you want to be mindful of is the longevity of the staff. Find out how long the key staff have been there, and also the direct support staff. Because if there is high turnover, like extremely high turnover, it is going to affect the quality of care that you receive. Right. So, and I would make a couple of visits. I would go and have lunch with them. I would go and have breakfast with them, and just pay attention. Pay attention to the residents and how they're feeling. Pay attention to how you feel. I am big on energy. If I'm in a space and I don't feel comfortable, I'm not going to go back to that space, or I'm going to be very mindful. So definitely go different times of day, Gloria, morning, afternoon, and in the evening. Do pop-ups and really spend some time there and get a feel for how you feel and how you think you would be supported there. And if you, develop a friendship or some engagement with other residents, ask them how they feel about it. What do they like most about it? What do they not like about it? And then, make a decision from there, and visit as many as you need to.
Yeah, I love that. That's one thing I always recommend, like you said, is to have a meal and just talk with the people that actually live there, because at the end of the day, the staff that are giving you the tour are trying to sell you on the facility. And so the way you're going to get the real story is from the residents. And my grandma lives in a community that she absolutely loves. And I love going to meals with her and just watching
Ooh,
how they all socialize. And they're talking about, oh, are you going to be at book club tomorrow? And you can tell that they all are so
actively engaged.
yes, engaged. And if you go to a community and they offer all of these events, but no one's going, or no one's, hanging out in the dining room during meals or playing bridge in the card room, like, it doesn't matter what they offer in the pamphlet. If people aren't actually participating, you're not going to have that welcoming environment.
That's right. You're not going to have the full experience. I appreciate her asking that question and you sharing, but you will actually feel the energy. The other thing too, Taylor, and I don't know if you paid attention to this when your grandma chose her assisted living. The lighting is very important to
Mm.
me. I don't like a dark place. I don't like it because the darkness, whether it's dark or whether it's light, is absolutely going to influence your mood. And I
Totally.
typically go into all the assisted livings, although I already have relationships with a few that I would recommend. But just say if it's someone out of my state that I have to help, I'm going to that community before I even make a recommendation. And if
Hmm.
I'm not feeling it, I'm not going to make that recommendation. But lighting is also very important. The vibrancy of the assisted living, because we got to keep in mind this is these individuals' homes, which is why when I go into a community, whether or not I have an individual living there or whether or not I am scoping out the scenery, if I see a staff person, let's see how I'm gonna say this nicely, not having a good day, right? And them not having a good day is affecting the residents, I'm gonna say something.
Yeah.
I always say something. I'm not gonna say anything to it just depends. If I'm a licensed social worker, so everybody is at risk of me saying, "Come here, baby. Let me talk to you for a minute," right? If I get that energy and I think that person, is open to talking, they may be having a bad day, then I may say something to them and just kind of encourage them throughout their day. But I've had one who was a nurse and she had such a nasty attitude. And I,
Mm.
I don't want y'all to think that this happens at every assisted living or nursing home, because it does not. Like, they're very isolated. There are more people who are working in these communities who want to be there and who provide good care, but there may be bad apples in every bunch. And she had such a nasty attitude. My client wanted to have dinner in her room because she was a recluse, right? She didn't have a big family. She lived alone, always lived alone. She told me, she said she had people, so that meant that she had a little money and she had people who were serving her, right? And if that's who she was before she moved into this community, that's the type of lifestyle she's used to. She wasn't disrespectful, she wasn't rude, but she wanted her meals in her room. She didn't want to go down and eat with a whole bunch of strangers. Now in an assisted living, in the standards, there is a standard in there that says that a person has to have communal meals at least once a day or what have you. Every state may be a little different, but they have to have communal meals at some point in time during the day. Well, ideally, yeah, but some people just don't want to do that. And so you can actually meet that particular guideline, because all of them are reviewed or assessed. You can meet that guideline by writing in the person's plan of care, because all of them have a plan of care that says this individual actually engages during these times, but during meals they eat well when they're eating alone, because that's their choice and
Mm.
that's what's conducive to their way of life. As long as it's written in that plan of care and the person signs it, because they still make decisions about their life, then they can eat in their room. But this nurse said to me, I went down, she said, when I got there, because Gloria, just like I'm telling you to do, I do the same thing. I pop up, and I came during dinner time and I saw where they were finishing up the dinner meal in the dining room. And I went up to my client and I said, how was dinner? She said, I haven't eaten yet. And I said, you haven't eaten yet? She said, yeah, I asked them to bring my food and they haven't brought it yet. So, I went out there like a Hellcat. I was, oh, like, wait a minute. Right. And so I went to the nurse. I said, my individual has not eaten dinner yet. She was like, well, she didn't come to the dining room. I said, well, she doesn't have to come to the dining room. She doesn't want to come to the dining room. It's written in her plan. Well, this is what she said to me. A geriatric care manager who's providing support to that individual. She said to me, y'all let her run y'all. She can get up and come to the dining room just like everybody else. I said to her, I said, thank you very much. So I walked my little happy butt bound down to that administrator's office who had already left for the day. I called her on her phone and I told her exactly what happened. I said, I'm not happy with it. I said, what these staff individuals have to realize and understand is that they don't run the show. This assisted living is where these individuals live. This is their home. Just like you don't allow anybody to come into your home to tell you what to do, you don't come into their home and tell them what to do. Well, she no longer works there. Now,
Yeah.
I gave her an opportunity. I didn't say, I didn't, put the call out and say, hey, y'all don't hire her because she's nasty to the individuals. I told the administrator, I said, talk to her and help her to understand the errors of her ways, because I feel like she's a good nurse, but she does not have great bedside manner. She
Mm,
does not have compassionate care. And I don't know if she's ever going to have it, but I want her to understand the errors of her ways, because I feel like it's important to teach people where they can improve, because they may change, and ultimately it better supports our vulnerable population.
absolutely. And it's so good to know, there are people like you who are in the corner of the senior and you're advocating. And like you said, most at assisted living communities, the staff want to be there. And that's what I've noticed in my experience as well. So finding those people that, are going to advocate for you, it's so good to know that that support's available.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll say too, anyone living in an assisted living in any state, there is the ombudsman's office. It is a weird name, but it is the ombudsman's office. OMBUDSMAN, ombudsman. They come in to investigate any allegation of abuse, neglect, exploitation, and quality of care. If you are living in an assisted living and you are concerned about your quality of care, you can search for your local ombudsman's office and you can call and make a report. If you are a family member or a loved one and you are concerned about your loved one's care in an assisted living or a nursing facility, you can call the ombudsman's office. They, have a time frame to investigate, up to 5 days. They will make a determination if there are any errors. A lot of times it's quality of care concerns, and that could be due to short staffing, but it does not matter. When it comes to family members and the folks who are living there, they just need to get it right. Whatever works, they need to get it right. But that is a support for you as you're managing the care of someone living in an assisted living, or if you're living there.
That's a great resource. Definitely good to know. So, okay, we chatted a little bit, maybe a more a negative experience that one of the seniors you worked with had. Could you share maybe a successful story you've experienced with someone moving into a senior living community and what that looked like?
So many. It is so many. I will tell you, there's one individual, she was in the mid stages of dementia. And this is a great example, because it'll show family members how sometimes out of home placement may be a better option. She was living at home alone. Her son lived upstairs, but he worked all the time. She had an in-home caregiver come in every day of the week. And when that caregiver wasn't there, then the family member would fill in the gap. But she was not active. I'm from the South, Taylor, so we say plunder. They just plundering a lot, right? Old people say plundering. She would just move from one room to the next, plundering, moving stuff around. Rummaging is the proper term of it, rummaging. And it got to the point where she started wandering away from her house. A
Mm,
lot of that was because she was not engaged and she was bored. She was not stimulated. She used to go to church a lot, sing on a choir. She was very active in her community. Everybody knew her. But when she started wandering away, is when I work with the family on out of home placement. And the reason I work with them on out of home placement and not look at in home care, because she already had in home care. She basically had 24-hour care. She had an alarm system set up, a monitoring system with cameras, because I tend to go to that as well, especially for someone who's providing care at a distance. But none of that was going to prevent her from wandering away, because the caregiver is not watching her 24/7. It's impossible for a person to watch a person 24/7. They
mm,
can't do it. And so as I thought about it and I was talking to the daughter, she was very nervous about her mom, because her mom had the potential of being uh, combative. And so she was concerned about her being combative with the staff, because this was going to be a new placement, a new location. It turns out she was not combative at all. And I told the daughter, these individuals are trained in creating space for individuals to experience something new, right? So they expect, if they're going to be some behaviors, they know how to manage it. We know how to manage it. We know how to show up and offer suggestions. But it was none of that. Like,
mm,
she was engaged with other people. She was in a dementia care community with the other individuals who had dementia. She would come and participate in the activities. When I would go, she would be busy. Number one, she wouldn't have time for me. She would be playing with the puzzles, like in there, just doing the puzzles on her own, smiling, like no behaviors at all, no wondering when she was going to go home. And I will say, a lot of times people think when they go into a nursing home, they're going to die within 30 days because
Mm,
a lot of that is because number one, they were placed there prematurely. They don't have the wraparound supports to even, manifest that journey. And so they may deal with other chronic illnesses that cause them to pass away. But she lived there, and this was during the pandemic too.
oh, wow.
So there's an additional layer, but she lived there for almost 2 years and lived well until she
Mm,
passed away. And so sometimes that could be a benefit because there are people there 24/7. People are there around the clock. There's support staff there, and there are other people who may be on their level, who may not be on their level, but it's something for them to look forward to. It is something for them to engage with and to engage in. So you may find a better quality of life because they have people who have the time to be there with her and to engage with her one-on-one 24/7.
oh, I love that, and to hear that she was, thriving and
Yeah.
participating.
Yeah,
That's
I
so
was
good.
nervous though, but that's the thing. And that's why I always say when you've met one person with dementia, you've met that one person. You don't know how they're going to respond, but we took all of the steps to ensure that she was a part of the process, even though she was in the middle stages of dementia. We still ensured that she would go and visit the community just so she can get a feel. I don't care if they have dementia or not, they still have feelings and they still have emotions. So
Mhm.
we just kind of monitor her and watch her in different communities that she visited, and we settled on one. Of course, the family makes the ultimate decision. I don't. I provide input, and they make the ultimate decision. But it was actually right down the street from me. So I was every day I pass by, I'm stopping by because I'm like, if at any given point in time, she gets agitated or wanting to go home, call me before you call the daughter. Call me, and then I'll provide recommendations because it is a team effort.
Mm,
Advocates who are in this space have to support the support staff and the caregiving staff as well. It's not I know everything and you know nothing. Absolutely not, because in some cases more than I do because you're there 24 hours. So how can we share information, compare notes, and develop a plan of care that should be flexible? It can change at any given point in time, depending on what the person is going through. And it really did work out well when we all create a partnership in care.
yeah, that's so good. It really is such a team effort, and everyone brings such a unique perspective with their background, so having all
For
of that
sure.
different input is so helpful. It takes a village, as they say.
Oh yeah, and it's necessary. I'm not a medical doctor, and so
Mm,
I don't have the medical experience outside of working with the medical practitioners and understanding certain medications and certain illnesses and how that could possibly have an implication on this or that. I know just enough to be dangerous, right?
yes.
I know just enough to say, okay, we need to call this clinician or we need to call this specialist, and this is what we need to say, and then they provide the input, and we report back. You got to report back so that way they can ensure, what changes need to be made so that way they can be healthy on the medical side, right? And then
Yeah.
there is a social environment. What does that look like? Better understanding who they were before they moved here. They were social butterflies. So how can they stay socialized? Or they were introvert. So stop forcing them to go out there and play bingo with all them strangers. They don't want to do that. Maybe a more intimate setting. Many assisted living communities, they do have a quiet room or a quiet space for those individuals who are introverts, who don't do well with overstimulation. And so you want to be sure that the community is conducive to our varying levels of self, or our varying layers of self, because sometimes I don't feel like talking. I know it's hard for y'all to believe. I know it's hard for y'all to believe. But sometimes I don't. I want to be to myself. I want to sit with myself. And so I want to ensure that I have space for that. I make sure that my daughter and my husband are going at the exact same time. So that way I can, do my morning ritual. But it throws me off every time when my daughter has late arrival at school, or if my husband has a late appointment. I'm like, y'all are still here.
Get
Y'all are
out of my
messing up the
hair.
vibe, right? Y'all still here, right? So you want to be sure that the community offers the differing layers of self, so that way you can ensure that at any given point in time, if I don't want to do this, I have space to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we have one last question before we start to wrap up. James asks, how would you recommend helping preserve my grandpa's independence? He shows signs of struggle. He likes to go to the bank to cash checks, but is starting to get confused and lost on occasion.
Oh, James, that's an easy one. Go with them. Either you go with him or have someone accompany him. And that's how you preserve his independence, by ensuring that he can still do the things that are important to him, but that he also has the support he needs in order for him to complete said task. So if he's getting confused in terms of, I don't know if he's still driving, but if he's driving himself to the bank and he's getting lost along the way, then you definitely want to drive him. I wouldn't recommend riding behind him or riding a separate car in front of him, because you can't control the scene. But definitely see if you can drive him to the bank, or if he's getting confused at the bank, meet him at the bank. And also too, there is always one person at that bank, a bank teller, that knows you or knows your dad so well. You definitely don't want to divulge any protected health information, because you can't do that. However, people know when there's a concern, right? And you can possibly say to that particular teller, if you see my dad come in here by himself, would you ensure to help him with what he needs? Because sometimes he needs a little more help than other times. Also, too, James, I don't know if you're on his bank account or not, but you want to be sure that you or someone who is trustworthy is on his bank account. Even if you have power of attorney or durable power of attorney, you still want to be on that person's bank account, because the financial institutions have an additional layer of security when it comes to accessing somebody else's funds. So definitely have a support mechanism in place to ensure he can still go to the bank, get to the bank, and handle his bank business, right? He probably don't want you in his business, so you can pretend that you're not listening, but you're ensuring you're preparing his environment for safety while ensuring that he can maintain his independence.
I love that. There's so many ways. I feel like when we were talking about cooking, it's like, hey, mom, I really want to learn how you make this family recipe. And I want to sit, like, there's so many ways you can
Oh, so many
involve.
ways.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, I tell you, but that didn't work. Well, it worked with my grandmama. She loved for us to be in the kitchen with her, but she didn't do good with explaining. She was born in 1922. She wasn't explaining nothing and got no recipes. You just got, I remember asking my grandmama when you mentioned that, because she was having some trouble baking her, she called it sweet bread. I didn't even know she called it sweet bread, but I was like, what is she talking about? I was asking my sister, who my grandmama raised her. I said, Grandma keeps talking about this sweet bread. Is she talking about the pecan twirls? My sister was like, I don't think so. She might be talking about the cake. And I said, Grandmama, where's your sweet bread? She said, well, I got one over here. I said, oh, she's talking about cake. And so I would sit there. I said, well, Grandmama, can you show me how to bake a cake? Said, oh, come on, sit down right there. And then she would be doing that, and she have her glasses on, and she would be sweating so bad, because when they're older like that, they do not cut on the air conditioner. She had on the fan, right? And as she was sweating, don't judge me. As she was sweating, I was like, I hope that sweat does not drop in, the cake mixture, because it was just dropping, right? And so I was like, Grandmama, I said, how do you know how much sugar do I put in it? She said, just watch what I'm doing. Just watch what I'm doing. I was like, ain't no way. I am never gonna get it. But she did it safely outside of the little sweat that was dropping. I just call that some love, right?
Yes.
She did well. And you are so right. There are so many ways to ensure that they can continue to do what's important to them, but offering the support that they need in order to maintain their safety.
Yeah, absolutely. James comments, he says, how much sugar do you add? And just
Enough,
enough.
right? Just enough.
Yes.
You'll know when it's enough. That's spot on, James.
I know. I always try to learn. My grandma's like, I'll just do a pinch of this and a dash of that. I'm like, what does that mean?
Right. And then my grandma, she'll push up her glasses and then she'll scrape it off. And I'm like, I'm not gonna get it. So I'm not even gonna try. I don't bake cakes.
No.
For what? Nobody's gonna eat it.
It's never the same as a grandma's cake. It never is.
No.
Oh, so good. Well, as we're wrapping up, I just want to share a few resources with you guys. We have a Caregivers Corner, which is our Facebook group dedicated to helping caregivers connect, to learn from one another and to learn from experts. So if you're new to this whole thing, or maybe you just have questions about anything we've talked about today, feel free to scan the QR code to join our community. And if you're a new family caregiver, we also have a course on caregiving. So it teaches all kind of the fundamentals, the basics, so you can start to get equipped and just know that you're not alone. People like myself and Dr. Macie are always around to answer your questions, and we'll be back with more live streams where we can answer any questions about topics that you have. Here we have our calendar. Our next one is coming up at the end of the month. So yeah, I just want to say thank you all so much for coming, and we'll see you next time. Bye, you guys.